In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking, with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ike, and this is an episode of Getting Ish Done. Another episode of Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Go ahead and click that like button, click the subscribe button, and hit that bell button twice. Yes. So is the majority of social science knowledge being generated out there a hoax? Okay. Is progressivism stifling social sciences by raising political concerns such as diversity and inclusion above and over academic rigor and pursuit of truth? Again, by raising political concerns over academic rigor and the pursuit of truth. Well, yes, apparently, according to two academicians, okay, whom wrote the hoax papers, okay, whom were able to get through certain ridiculous ideas that will not otherwise pass the rigor of rationality and empiricism into certain papers, certain journals, if you will, in the social science establishment. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about that today, and reviewing a video with Dr. Thunder. How you doing, sir?
What's happening, man? How you doing?
Not bad, not bad, not bad. Just checking out this beat here that's playing in the background, and I'm like, maybe I'll stop it for now. But let's jump right into this, okay, Dr. Thunder. In your experience, how has this idea of progressivism, okay, or any other forms of political correctness hindered, the progress of truth, or really, in your actual experience, the pursuit of academic rigor, let's say, or shall we say blinded one towards the pursuit of truth? Or have you ever actually seen this happen, or is this all just crazy right-wingers complaining about academia again?
Yeah, I will, I've used this sort of illustration, about a problem that I see. I've used this frequently, so I may have actually used this on Getting Ish Done before, but I don't remember exactly. But basically, so say for instance, if you have an academic professor, someone that has a particular political agenda, particular perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're allowed to have that. You're allowed to have opinions. You're allowed to have your own perspective. You're allowed to have, we do have free speech, and we do have what's called academic freedom. And what that means is that you can use what you want to teach what you want. And the curriculum is owned by the faculty. So whatever courses that I design, that intellectual property does not belong to the institution. It belongs to the professor. Okay. So I think that's a positive thing, right? Where I think it goes wrong is when you have, say, a professor that says, okay, I'm left leaning. I want my students to also be left leaning. Okay. And that's a pretty natural, if it's not specifically stated as such or not, it's a pretty normal and natural thing to desire to recreate, to sort of replicate yourself. You have opinions on things. Academics have opinions, and those opinions are, we're trying to pursue truth. We're trying to all of this kind of stuff, and so maybe you feel like you landed on something, and it's worthy of being duplicated. So, say if you had such a professor, which you have them all over the place, and they're left leaning, they decide, hey, I want my students to be left leaning. Okay. Now, you're doing yourself a disservice. This professor will be doing themselves a disservice if they also block any countervailing views. So if they are, for instance, leading the protest against Ben Shapiro, speaking on campus, invited by the, I don't know, the young conservatives or whatever, say if they're leading the charge for that. Okay, you're allowed to do that. You have free speech. But you need to understand that conservatives actually have an advantage. And the advantage is that when you go higher education, all you hear is liberal thought. That's all you hear. Yep. Okay, it's a strong bias in that direction. It's all you hear. So if you're able to remain being a conservative, then what that means is that you've developed argumentation that, with the awareness of the actual arguments that are against the conservative positions, you've been able to defeat those arguments in some way satisfactory to yourself. Okay. All right.
Yeah, or at least you're exposed to both as a conservative, right? So even if
right,
so you're definitely at an advantage already on that
but
level.
As a liberal, you don't hear any of the conservative ideas. So then what happens is this person that you want to, carry your water for you or whatever. This that person, as soon as they hear some good conservative thoughts, and there are a lot of them, there's a lot of really smart people that are on that, on that side of things. It's going to knock them off of that. It's going to knock them off of that idea. It's going to make them very easy to defeat. So you don't actually do anybody a service by sheltering them from conservative ideas. You can go into this whole idea of safe spaces, in institutions, all this kind of malarkey. What, really? Safe spaces from what? From ideas? Like you don't want to hear ideas that you don't like?
Let me push back in this sense. For the purpose of the question of the ideal of pursuit of truth and let's call it academic rigor, okay? Because the danger you've described, you've described a process, okay? Gonna lean left. Oh, that's perfectly fine. I found a solution. I want to duplicate it. I think this is right, okay? And all right-thinking people agree with me, right? Okay. And us right-thinking people think these students should learn these things, and we're doing that kind of a thing, and maybe we even protest. All that is fine. And you describe a danger of maybe not being so strong. There was a particular recent philosopher that that popularized what you just said in terms of one of those guys in Hume's time, talking about knowing other people's the argument of the opposition, right? But still, I would say, okay, cool. Well, is that really a big problem? What I mean is this: have you seen progressivism block actual truth from being sought after within the space of academic research, within the space of what is actually taught and allowed within the space of free inquiry, right? Not this idea of leanings and such. Okay, does it actually block free inquiry? And we'll get to a video in a second. But in your experience, have you seen it?
I'll put it this way. So, especially when you're say you're an assistant professor. So the way that tenure works at the institution I work at is if you're hired on a tenured track, then you are first an assistant professor. Then you must prove yourself, and that's the tenure process. You'll have a tenure clock, as it were. And there's a fourth year review that's very important. And then they make their decision in the sixth year. And if that goes bad, then you have 1 year to find another job. It's up or out. And so, especially when you're an assistant professor, and I would argue even when you're an associate professor that desires to be promoted to full professor, if you have any sense at all, then you'll recognize that politics is going to have something to do with if you get promoted or not. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, come on, that's just how things are. Okay. So if you're running around spouting certain kinds of ideas that you know are countervailing, to the whatever the common positions are. If you are, running around with Trump bumper stickers on your car and, Donald Trump T-shirts and stuff like that, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario where you're going to be treated fairly, because so much of what it is that we're talking about is opinion. Now, let me tell you something. Some of these schools, the practice, the policy with respect to promoting someone to getting them tenure, all of the tenured faculty are allowed to vote on your case. They don't have to even look at your dossier. Okay? Mm-hmm. They don't have to look at your dossier. They don't have to. So the way it works is you're in a room, everyone's sworn to secrecy, and you're talking about candidates, right? You're talking about people that are trying to go up for tenure, and there's a discussion that happens. Some of these institutions will do a first vote, it's like a straw vote, and then they'll do the real vote. So if the straw vote has maybe there's enough negative votes, then you'll have a discussion, and you're only allowed to discuss certain things, right? And so a person could vote no on the straw vote, which led to a conversation, not participate in the conversation, never read anything, just felt snubbed because one day during your first year, you said something in a faculty meeting that they didn't agree with. And they can just vote no, and it's anonymous. Okay? This is what we're talking about. Now, if you don't think that having certain political views or even certain religious views, if you don't think that that's going to have an effect on your, on if you think you're going to get tenure or not, you're silly. And so what usually happens is people that are going up for tenure and people that want to be promoted to full professor, they're going to keep their mouth shut. Mm-hmm. They're not going to say anything, and they certainly are not going to align themselves with a particular kind of research outside of what their job is, a particular kind of research that is, going to make it tough for them. Now, is it possible to still get promoted? to full professor? Is it still possible to get tenure? Yes, when you have different opinions and views.
Okay, so
But I think there's a
basically,
reason why so many professors are left leaning. And I don't necessarily think it's because they all think that way. I think that the institution is that way, and you sort of orient yourself with whatever it is that you think you need to do or say in order to, you know, get what it is that you need to get.
can't we have a situation though where, okay, sure, you're left leaning, or this is a self-selected group of people, so they're gonna share certain traits. Okay, those people who go over there and do the academia thing, they're gonna have certain commonalities. Regardless of their
Mm.
commonalities, can they not operate under a system that says, hey, because take for example, the experimental physicist doesn't, for example, has okay, there's a lot of BS that happens, political economy, politics that happens with human beings, generally speaking. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I do recognize what you're saying to be 100% true. And I see how that, on a simple level, the way you just described, when you then broaden it out through many institutions and generations and time, right, will start to produce people whom were just like, you know what? It's best to just toe the company line. Therefore, these papers, which we're about to review, right, is just, rather than me even bothering, I'll just, if they want me to say AXY, I'll just say AXY and then I get in, right? I'll say AXY and then I get my papers published, for example. I'll say AXY and I get my tenure. I'm not even going to worry about whether AXY has anything to do with truth or not. And this is where truth gets blocked, is where it's not like, oh,
Right.
people are actually there standing against truth, but it's because the incentives are such that they don't favor truth. They favor you saying AXY so that you get published, so that you get tenure.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there was one, I remember one time, and I was still an assistant professor. And I thought different of it after this happened. And I never took that risk again. Where I was in a public forum at the university. Professors, it was a panel, big, big auditorium or whatever. And I asked a question about, I made a statement about the, it was a pretty rudimental, and the question was not as well stated or well formed as I might have if I did it now, because I wasn't as informed about certain things, and I think I probably could have asked the question in a way that would have made them feel less threatened. But I made a statement about, because I think this was around the time. So this would have been Barack Obama, right? So he was president, and I had some criticism about Obama, and partially it was related to black people and his failure to do anything really meaningful for us. And the other part of it was from a sort of Christian perspective, where I'm a pro-life. I'm pro-life. That makes it difficult for me to support folks that have certain political agendas, especially ones that sort of usurp or overstep the black stuff. And you know that the uh, Noit Roba agenda in the uh, and the in the gay marriage thing, that stuff was sort of headline stuff, and any of the black stuff was like, maybe that's on the back page of the newspaper and fine print all the way to the bottom. And so anyhow, but I said what I said, and I could tell that they were threatened and they were offended by my question and everything. And after that, I was like, you know what? I think that was not a good idea. And I think I'm not ever going to do that again. And I haven't.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to the super chat. Okay. Thank you very much. That is Canadian dollars. 2 of them says greetings, little Gami and Miss and Dr. Thunder Gyogami, indeed. And okay, so we have something here which we haven't gotten into it yet, but we're going to be playing a video here, and there is a conversation already implied by what we're saying, which is, I said, is progressivism ruining social science? And I said social science for a particular reason, because it's the particular area that the infection is most easily planted first, at least, because of the less quantitative nature of a lot of the social sciences. Let's say, take, for example, anthropology, right? You take anthropology and cultural anthropology, and the interpretations that one may make from an archaeological dig or some kinds of cultural set of artifacts that we find, and what it means to humanity and the kind of the society, all those other kinds of things, okay? So it becomes a little blurred. And someone already pointed out here that economics is one of the most quantifiable social sciences, okay? But here is the big deal with the social sciences. When it comes to macro things, don't listen to them too much, okay? Macroeconomical, kind of broad, it's filled with big models. And just like with climate change or any other kind of big data-driven model without fundamental underlying theories of understanding with which we, can interpret the model, these things are prone to what we call the macro BS fallacy. It's easy to macro BS than to micro BS, okay? It's hard for me to BS about what the stock price is going to be tomorrow, for example, right? That's a micro type BS. That's hard for me to do. But I can macro BS all day about projections into the future, about the value of, and China is going to, you get what I'm saying, Dr. Thunder, right? I can sound good about that, about why the company's, but what's the price going to be tomorrow? It gets harder. So there's a micro aspect, and also there's the lack of quantifiability aspect that makes the social game prone to these kinds of attack. But we've always had empiricism and rationality, and we've always known a common sense argument in the past and what a common sense paper should be. So why then should these papers, which we're about to listen to, okay, papers that do not pass the empirical rigor, the rationality rigor, why should they then be published when indeed papers are the way that show your seriousness? Now, Dr. Thunder, we're going to talk about you, because I believe for you, performance is a requirement, right? For you to kind of keep your bona fides and be seen as a serious professor, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to perform. So it must feel kind of crappy for other professors to be able to write BS papers, okay, or things that don't have anything to do with reality, while you have to perform. Or let's say the physicist has to actually look at the electron microscope and actually make records and actually try to make some progress and make some sense of something. Some other people are just BSing over here in some other department and, putting themselves in each other's journals. Now, what tends to happen is, the physicists may be snubbing their nose at the people over there, saying, but it'll only just die there in that department. But guess what tends to happen? It starts creeping in. It gets into biology, right? Biological essentialism becomes like a crime now, a thought crime, okay? And then next thing you know, the physics lab is overtaken by political concerns, or it's, the experiment has to affirm, what else, Dr. Thunder? What are the other words? Anyways, let's go ahead and play this before.
Right. Justice.
Welcome back. Good
Thanks.
to see you again, sir.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Mr. Lindsay.
Good to be
James.
here.
James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, okay, academics who wrote the hoax papers. The hoax papers are papers in which they put woke ideas, okay, the right ideas, but without logic, without rigor, but they were accepted because they said AXY, as we said before. When you just say the right combination of words, and we'll get you through. Forget if it makes any sense or not.
Or Jim, depending upon preferences.
That's right. Go with Jim.
First of all, gentlemen, and there was one other person that you did this with, this whole project.
Helen Pluckrose from England.
Shout out to Helen from England.
Thanks.
She back across the pond right
She's
now?
across the pond. She's
fish and chips. And
she's making tea and managing
Fish and
Ariel
chips.
magazine.
That's right.
Excellent. All right. Well, shout out to her as well. Let's explain what you guys did and what's so significant about it, because when I first read it, my first inclination, I had two reactions. One was a huge laugh. I laughed really hard. And then I said, thank God somebody exposed this.
Yep.
Yeah.
So tell me what you guys did.
Jim, go for it.
Yeah. So
Well, let's explain who you guys are and what you did.
Okay.
My background is in mathematics. I bailed out on academia in 2010, though, because I kind of see the writing on the wall. And so now I am a renegade gender scholar, and I write nonsense about genitals. That's primarily what I do. I mean, I manage a business at home, so I got out of academia.
Yeah, and I teach philosophy at Portland State University, and I met Jim years ago. We collaborated, and we've written a number of things over the years. And at some point, it just came to be we had to do something about this. It was just too ridiculous, and it was translating into the real world. And so we collaborated, and here we are.
Well, let's explain what you did and what was ridiculous. What we're talking about, what was ridiculous, is there's many fields of studies that you can get legitimate degrees in that are absolutely preposterous.
Right.
Okay, so that's another way to put the matter on the table. But shout out to Cyclid. Okay, shout out to you saying that indeed the women of the left are the hottest. I just don't tell them how I vote. Okay. Thank you very much for your $10 contribution. Yes, Joe Rogan just said it. Like, okay, cool. Basically, the idea here we're going to discuss is that there are many fields where you can get these quote unquote legitimate credentials, but they're absolute BS. How can it be BS? How can we have this temple of rationality, empiricism, the university where you're supposed to come together and seek the truth? Okay. How can we have in there we have the money changers in the temple, to use that image, and let's see the story of these particular group of money changers. Okay, and again, the idea might be from certain people who say, "Oh, my study." Take for example the Economist. Okay, he's inside the social sciences edifice. And he is saying, but my stuff is based on some real numbers, and I have to have real models that explain things, and the market is something that prices are real in terms of prices being this computation that averages out all the different values that are out there. There's distributed information about what people want and what people are willing to pay, and the market is this giant computer, and it calculates the price and does these things. And now, these are rational models. They can be tested, the validity of them, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, you're still not immune to the attack of these political types of commitments and movements. Dr. Thunder already kind of showed us the process, right, by which it happens. Okay, before it gets as ridiculous as this hoax paper stuff, there is a gradual, simple, social, political, I'm gonna go along to get along aspect to this as well. But anyways, let us continue.
Literally filled with nonsense,
Right.
taught by nonsense people who live in these nonsense bubbles.
Right.
And then they give these degrees, and these people go out in the real world.
Exactly.
And they infect things.
Yep.
Their ridiculousness infects certain, particularly tech industry businesses.
Yep.
Like you see it infecting.
James Damore.
Yeah. Well, let's explain what you guys did.
Yeah, so we started about a year and a half ago now. It was last summer. We started writing a bunch of academic papers for the journals that represent these fields. And so everybody understands what an academic paper is getting out of the gate. This isn't like an op-ed that you dash off for like Washington Post or some magazine or whatever. This is a thing like academics work their careers to write one or two of these a year.
Yeah.
And so they're really hard to write. They're supposed to be hard to get published. So we wrote 20 of them in 10 months.
Dr. Thunder, in your kind of, for the performance requirement, is there a way of faking it? Because basically, again, ladies and gentlemen, academic papers, this is how you kind of show that you're a serious person, both for the scholar and the university. They were able to write off 20 in these fake fields, which they'll get into. In your situation, is there a way of faking it?
Okay, so for me, so publication is the thing, right? So performance is equivalent to publication, and in fact, performance is publication. So things like composition, arrangements that I would write, so music, things like records, CDs, recording on other people's projects. That would be something that would be pertinent, that would count towards that. And then just raw performances, so live performances. So all of that stuff is going to count. Now, one of the things about being a prolific performer like I am, meaning that I'm playing a lot. I play with a lot of different kinds of folks and a lot of different styles and things. I couldn't keep getting called for certain gigs if I was not competent, right? So the kinds of gigs that I get, so like for instance, I've done a few tours with the Count Basie Orchestra. I wouldn't be able to do that gig if I didn't have a level of competence. Okay, so it's kind of like a real world measurement, right? And that, of
So you're saying there's
course,
no way
is
to
going-
fake. There's no way to fake it in your particular situation where performance is a
So
requirement.
here's
Performance is okay.
Here's the thing, though. There's always a way to fake it. Okay, now this is what I would characterize as faking it. Anything outside, okay, now you could lie about stuff. Obviously, that would be faking it.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also do a lot of brown nosing and butt kissing.
Mm-hmm.
So something that happens frequently is, so say for instance, if I won a gig with a particular artist, and I'm at an institution that has a significant budget for, an annual festival or for whatever it is, I could book the person that I want, for instance, and then try to cultivate a relationship based on me booking gigs for them, and then try to get a gig that way. Now, that would work initially, potentially could work
Mhm.
initially.
You're gonna
You
run
get a
out of
single gig,
those cards
but
and those things to play, right?
yeah, the thing is that on an academic calendar, there's a lot of different things on the calendar. There's all kinds of recruiting kinds of events and concerts and all kinds of stuff. So there could be a lot of opportunities to bring different folks that you want to sort of bump elbows with. Now, some of that I think is totally honest, and you need to do that anyway because you're trying to bring good people to campus because you want the students to have interaction with them. But I've also seen folks sort of find ways to sort of take advantage of that, end up with some gigs, that they would never have gotten because they're not really that kind of player. But even in that scenario, it's not likely that they would get called back to do the gig. So they might get a one-off, but they're not going to get. But if you bring in enough different folks, you could actually create, these.
But effectively, it's harder.
On your schedule.
It'll be hard to fake the thing by which you're measured, right? And even if you did,
Right.
we're able to successfully fake it. You're describing that it's going to be a kind of a momentous task to fake it, right?
Right.
Which is perhaps even worthy of recognition in and of itself, right? Like, well, you're a great politician with all those gigs you got, okay? With how bad your sax playing is, but anyways, so. Again, ladies and gentlemen, they were able to write these papers, okay? These papers which show supposed to be like, serious things, pass the rigor. Again, all we're saying is empiricism and logic and rationality. Let's hear about these papers, the hoax papers.
And 7 of those got accepted. 4 were actually published. And
then we got
at least
busted.
4 more.
4 were published, 7 were accepted.
Yeah, we got busted, and at least 4 more were on track. Maybe 5 or 6 more would have gotten in.
What's the difference between getting accepted and getting published?
So the process with everything in academia is really slow, and a lot of people don't know this. So you send off this article, the editor looks at it, and the editor either gives it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If they give it the thumbs up, it goes off to peer reviewers, and that process takes months, often as long as, we had one paper that was 8 months under peer review. So the reviewers look at it, they try to figure out if the arguments are good, they try to figure out if the research is good, they evaluate that, they give extensive comments, they send it back to you, then you have to revise it according to whatever they say, make it better is what's supposed to happen. They made ours crazier. And so then,
So they, based on the comments, had to revise theirs to make it even crazier, make the inferences even crazier, make the stuff even woker than it was. Okay, let's continue.
They did every single time.
We took the feedback and made the papers just the most extreme thing.
Most extreme things. And so then you send them back. So now you're probably 3-4 months in just to the review process, not to the writing, which should also take months.
Yeah.
And then the editor will either send it back to the reviewers to see if it was good enough, or they'll just evaluate it themselves, depending on where it stands. And then they'll make a decision as to whether or not to accept it or reject it or ask for more revisions. And then when they accept it, that means the journal's ready to publish it. But then the publishing process requires all the typesetting, proofing, all the stuff that goes into making it professional for an academic journal. And that can take months.
And publishing is the coin of the realm. Like, that's it. So the ideal is one paper every year in the humanities broadly. So that's how you credential yourself. That's how you get tenure, which is a job for life. That's how you get to teach people these ideas, who then, as you said, go out into the workforce, 5-6 years later and infect everybody with total silliness. So it's the gold standard peer review. So we saw a tremendous problem.
Can we tell people some of the titles of these
Sure.
articles? Because right now they're like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
So we had an article, the one that got the most press was about dog humping in Portland, Oregon. It was called, how did it go? Was it called Queer Performativity and was it Rape Culture?
Rape culture
And Queer Performativity in Dog Parks in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, we claim
Rape culture. Oh, grape. Oh my God. Anyways, they already said it. The videos already. We already got like a red at this point. we already got shanked by YouTube right now. We just got shanked. But grape culture and queer performativity at dog parks in Portland, right? So this was a paper that they wrote. Already kind of like crazy, like what kind of serious research is going on here? And this particular branch of studies is called Grievance Studies, okay? So some kinds of gender studies and racial studies, studies about grievance, as it says, okay? So it's based very much in the intersectional world. So to call it social science, I understand, let me say now, is a bit of of course, you got to have a nice title for YouTube, right? So you got to be like, social science is a hoax, okay? And then we made a case for why social science is more amenable to that, for the infection to start, but I say it can spread. But really, we're talking about this particular edge here, the postmodern edge of certain kinds of what we may call modern day anthropology and sociology. But anyways, let's let them describe what their papers are, and then let's see what Dr. Thunder thinks about it.
To have examined under a fake name.
Is that
all
a real
fake
word?
names.
Performativity?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, they have their own lingo, their own,
But is that a word in the English language? Performativity?
I mean, in the academic English language,
yeah.
not in common parlance, but that's like the whole thing. This is huge, right? This goes back
Right.
a long way. That's Judith Butler's whole thing, was that
Who's
gender is
Judith Butler?
Judith Butler is probably the most influential feminist scholar, or gender scholar, actually, I should say, that's been in maybe the last 30 years. She's big time. And so she had this whole thing that gender is performative. It's something you perform. It's not something that has anything to do with your biology.
Retracted article.
Oh, yeah, there
Human
it is.
reactions to rape culture and queer performativity at urban dog parks in Portland, Oregon. Why is it retracted?
Because it's
Because they realized that you
bogus.
guys were hosing them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Human reactions to rape culture and queer performativity.
we claim to have closely examined the genitals of
just under 10,000.
just under 10,000 dogs, and then interrogated their owners as to their sexual orientation.
So we checked out the dog's nuts and then said, "Excuse me, sir, are you gay?"
Yeah.
And you
So
asked
that's
them
what-
if they gendered their dogs.
Yeah, well, we made up these totally insane, dogs humping incidents and how they beat female dogs, but they didn't beat male dogs. So that's one of the papers that we made.
Yeah, the oppression of dogs and whatnot. So far, what do you think about their tactics? Okay, they're going out there, they're writing ridiculous things, claiming ridiculous data, and these people over there at the woke journals are like, yeah, I think they have a point here. We need to look into queer performativity, okay, and the grape culture at the dog parks.
Yeah, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And there's a lot of really smart people that are very knowledgeable, but they're total idiots. And I think one of the reasons why I think it's important to have some sort of worldview that is cohesive and has explanatory power that helps you to make sense out of things and create some sort of consistency, that has some sort of objective principles associated with it, is that it, at least in some way, helps you to I maybe not fall for everything,
Yeah.
and it's just I don't know, man. It's like if you don't have
Mhm.
so a lot of it seems to me like there's a certain type of person that they don't really have anything grounding them, and you keep getting more and more education, and I
Mhm.
I just don't see look, the reason I have my degrees is for a particular reason. Um, like my value as a human being is not really associated with my degrees. Like my degrees don't make me more valuable as a person. They don't make me smarter than somebody that doesn't have degrees. Um, it's
Okay.
I,
So
it's just more and more ways to try to create a weird separation, a strange sort of. You remember I was talking about that whole scholars and visionaries thing, where the
Mhm.
scholars seem to be very much pleased if they can confuse you.
Yeah.
I got the weirdest, the craziest, the wildest. I know you never thought about this before. If you can confuse a smart person, then you've arrived as a scholar. There's that sort of aspect of it, and that's what a lot of this stuff seems like it is. It just keeps getting more and more abstract, and it's like the
Y-
difference between someone that is a great composer, and maybe they didn't go to school, but they've been
mhm.
soaking in music, and they know how to connect with people with their composition, and someone that went to school for composition and knows all of these ways to do this and has the $1,000 word theory words and everything together, but their music sounds like total noise, and they
Yeah.
develop some way to manipulate things in some weird way that resonates with the frequency that the earth is resonating at the molecular level, and whatever, but it doesn't sound like music. It doesn't reach anybody. It doesn't connect to anybody. It's
So
a real issue.
you have highlighted a few things, and you were perhaps at the danger of giving them too much credit by saying that maybe what they're doing is akin to certain things that some people may be doing with modern music. Um, however, there is some just pure BS that is going on here that doesn't even need to
Yeah.
be analyzed at the level of people whom are just trying to be. It's not even. It's below sophistry, right? So sophistry is perhaps
Mm.
adjacent to the whole, shall we say, scholar thing. Okay, scholar thing, sophistry. We can think of it just as a debater, someone who just likes to win. Confuse, just kind of do that kind of thing. So all that stuff is possible. It is going on, but over here is something where we just before we stepped into this room, okay, we already knew that it was BS. In other words, what on the screen right now saying, well, the tactics of these particular scholars here writing these papers and exposing that the emperor has no clothes with regards to rationality in some fields, right? That tactic was just kind of showing us something which we already a priori knew. Like it's not hidden or anything like that. It's just pure BS. A lot of these particular studies, right? So, but there are many layers to the things that you described. You mentioned the worldview thing as well, which is another layer. Which again, but then that gives them too much credit. But that worldview thing is an important one. I think that shout out to Plato. Basically, everyone needs a cave, okay, in order to make sense of the world, in order for those shadows to land correctly, in order for you to at least make interpretations and judgments and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. um the idea of simply just being, and there's some people actually on YouTube, for example, that are relatively smart, but they don't have any cave, they don't have any kind of you can tell this is not a, because the ideal these days is to transcend caves before you ever had one, right? Which is kind of silly, right? Everybody wants to be the guy, right, that goes up into the sun and sees the sun right from the very beginning, okay, right out of the womb. Everyone wants to be freaking Aristophanes or whatever. That's the new ideal, right? So everyone is just like, oh, I don't know, no caves, no, I'm spiritual, whatever. Anyways, let's continue.
I'm an
The
individual.
other paper that
Well,
we
with
wrote,
this one also, they had the whole thing
I'm an
like if a
individual.
male dog humps another male dog, especially men would freak out and break it up.
Yeah.
Stop that because that's the queer performativity part.
yeah,
But then if a male dog humped a female dog, they'd be like, get her, girl.
Oh, so I get it. Okay, at least there's a nice story. There's a nice dance going on here. When the male dog humps another male dog, they're like, no, get out of here. Queer performativity, not allowed. No, bro. Okay, but when it's grape culture, which is the male dog humping the female dog, they're like, yeah, hump, pump and dump.
yeah.
Get her, get on it.
So you're basically raging against
That's
heteronormativity.
exactly
Yep.
correct. We told them exactly what they wanted to hear, and we gave them bogus statistics to fuel what they already wanted to believe.
Yeah, and we started off with the idea that what we wanted to get to was a conclusion, and then we made up all the crap in between
Yeah.
to get to it. And the conclusion was feminism should train men the way we train dogs so that we can get rid of rape culture.
Put them on leashes.
Yeah.
It's right in the paper. It's
It
all
is.
there. Unfortunately, we cannot put men on leashes. It's not politically feasible to put men on leashes.
You guys wrote that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Or to
publish
yank
it.
their leashes when they misbehave.
Yeah,
And this paper didn't just get published. The journal said that this was exemplary scholarship and gave it an award. Says one of the
Oh my god.
yeah.
says one of the best pieces. It's this.
Okay, so Dr. Thunder, what should have been the response of the journal? Okay, we in the chat, everyone in the chat, what should have been the response of the journal? Because they said, hey, look, we have found a nice little lens through which we can view this, so these social constructs, the social constructs of hetero and or gay and or different kinds of gender. So basically, gay performativity and grape culture. I'm going to look at it through the dogs and how the dog owners treat the dogs when it comes to humping behavior. What do you say? You haven't read it yet. Okay, it could be real. Maybe they did the research. Dr. Thunder, what do you say to that idea? Oh, really?
Okay, so
you gotta have,
okay,
I'll
give you
gotta
the-
have a reason why you kick it out.
Okay, so here's the thing. I understand why they would publish.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good.
Now, this is why. So, if you know that the folks that sort of reverence your publication are of a certain persuasion, of a certain type that would applaud that sort of thing, then okay, if I myself had had particular biases that made it really hard for me to see in that blind spot, that I was being that they were teasing me. I took it seriously, but they were actually teasing me. With this, it was a very elaborate tease, but because I'm so biased, I can't see that it's actually somebody making fun of me.
And it's actually quite funny and brilliant, the actual idea itself of going to dogs, because you can see the connection. Like, okay, these dog owners are men, so we can study toxic masculine behavior, viewed through how, men handle their dogs in dog parks with female dogs and all these other kinds of things. And the performativity, hence we can see in real time how these social constructs are created. And maybe we can have then some ideas about how this thing also plays out in human constructions as well, right? Or whatever.
No. So yeah. So if I was biased a certain way, I could see that I may want to believe something, but this is why people have to do their own research. They have to, the Bible says, what is it? Study to show yourself approved, right? You have to verify information. Just because somebody writes it down, they could be making stuff up. And how ironic is it that a company that is publishing, a publisher of academic articles is not actually scrutinizing well enough to be able to catch this. I mean, this should have been really easy for them to catch, right?
I'm going to ask you
Just
later about politically dangerous knowledge, for example, like, because, you know, so far we've been kicking on them, right? In terms of the people who would allow these kinds of crazy ideas to happen. And we didn't just kick right now. We did say, okay, cool. I do see how you can fall for it. And looks like a nice little salacious story. It's like a nice little, it'll be the splash of the month on the journal, right? You know, like, oh, this is an interesting one, right? It'll make the rounds at the cocktail parties. We can all talk about what's going on at the dog parks with regards to gender performativity, right? But there's something called, you know, let's say politically dangerous knowledge that maybe we should police against, which is in the vein of bringing in, because again, this is basically simping, right? Putting lower things higher. What do I mean by that? I'm saying that you're putting political concerns over pursuit of truth and, let's say, academic rigor. So you got pursuit of truth and academic rigor, but then you take political concerns such as diversity and inclusion, for example, and you put it on top of that. Okay, so that's the basic issue here. But one possible argument that people have is in the politically dangerous ideas. Okay, whenever you're trying to block free speech, it's always that danger thing. The crowded theater, for example, is the other one, right? So danger is usually the one, and then we'll scrutinize later. Are there actually politically dangerous ideas, Dr. Thunder, that you should stop? You know, radicals like yourself, Dr. Thunder, from going out there and spewing, because, you know, you're infecting these are impressionable youth. And we don't want you, Dr. Thunder, with all your crazy curmudgeon energy to be infecting them with all that venom, you know, creating little monsters out there. It's not right.
This year is their 25th anniversary. So this journal's been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah.
And it's their 25th anniversary. So they're picking out the best papers throughout the whole year and putting them, you know, pride of place in some issue of their journal. And ours was going to be in the 7th issue.
So it either is great or it's not great. So it either is great or it's not great. Like, why are they retracting it?
Oh yeah, because they know we're bogus.
So what? You were right.
Well,
it's like a broke.
I would have done the same. I would have kept it. Right. I don't know how you feel about that, Dr. Thunder, but if I thought it was great, okay, and now you're like, oh, they were fake. I'm like, okay, whatever. I think it was still a great idea, and this is why I'm going to leave it in. Okay, but anyways, it's
broken clock.
Yeah,
the clock's broken, but it is actually 12 o'clock.
So they would claim it's incorrectly that we fabricated statistics, but we wrote other papers called, one was fat bodybuilding. So they claim that there should be a category introduced in traditional bodybuilding called fat bodybuilding, where people come and display their fat before the audience. And we didn't manufacture any statistics for that, and they love that. They thought it. You know,
that's actually another brilliant idea too, because I wonder if there are ways of kind of like molding your fat or like getting fat in a nice way. You know what I mean? It's like you're gonna go on a total pizza, pasta, whatever your carb is, because everybody loves carbs. Okay, whatever your carb deal is, Dr. Thunder. For 6 months, you're going to go straight, but you're going to sculpt your fat so that you look like a nice little round jelly donut without no dimples. So no whatever it is.
It's called a waist trainer.
Is that how it's done? Waist trainers is how you get. Oh yeah, there you go. So a new sport with waist trainers, all kinds of bands, all kinds of crazy things, head straps, you know. But anyways. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you know, it again, you know, it should be the easiest thing in the world for an academic journal to be able to, I mean, because they use peer review, right? So what that means is that they found a bunch of other professors that were willing to sign off on these ridiculous articles. Okay, and that should tell you something. In you know, that saying, you know, you can fly in a PhD to justify anything and to, you know, and to provide scholarship. And hey, I've published all of these articles in these, you know, academic journals. This is the thing. That's the cachet.
A murder trial 25 years from now will have hinged upon that article. Imagine some kind of dystopian universe where this, you know, everyone was writing articles like this, and then later, you know, few generations from now, scholarship based on this gender performativity dog type research is established, and someone sees evidence, oh, that was your dog because we know of this research. And people have written all kinds of articles, and this guy gets sent to death because of a fake. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and now, and here's the thing too. Along the same lines, just just imagine that folks that are conducting research on something that's legitimate, and they're citing these ridiculous articles in rather critical, important ways that either make or break their central sort of premise or the central theory, hypothesis, or whatever. There's all kinds of problem, and we already are in a situation where people don't know who to believe or who to listen to, and there's all these different versions of the stories and everything else. And yeah, I mean, it just shows you that no matter how smart you get, how many degrees you get, how much information you take in, you can still be a straight fool. You can still be a total idiot, and the information that you're taking in be completely and totally worthless. Uh, 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 Peterson, not Jordan Peterson, the other Peterson that we talk about all the time.
There's another one. Do we talk about Jesse Lee Peterson all the time?
Jesse Lee Peterson. Well, I'm saying that the space talks about Jesse.
Gotcha.
Okay, but one thing that he says, and on the surface, this seems like kind of like low budget, like kind of just something to say. But when you think about it more and you actually survey the folks that he's talking about, it actually starts to make more sense. And that is, he actually tells folks that being like a Bible thumper is not really a good thing. He says, because you can bring in all these Bible thumpers and they don't even have any, they don't have any sense. Just about regular stuff. Just ask them just a regular question, and they're quite quoting Bible verses and stuff like this, but they don't actually, they're not actually saying anything meaningful. They don't have any sort of central sort of theme to what it is that they're saying. They don't. It's just like regurgitating a bunch of information.
And you can obviously do that with Freud and with academic junk too, and with quoting of these particular journals. Now, also the thing about this journal is this, okay, because you're at this particular juncture, there's just basically two people that we're pointing at that did something wrong. Okay, number one, these people messed up the rules. They trolled. Okay, they went out there and trolled. Right? They trolled. We get it. And then the journal, failure of peer review, as you alluded to, and as Chukwu Igwe is talking about in the chat, right? Failure of peer review on their end, or also just kind of a failure to see just this is common. They're obviously baiting you in. Come on, don't be so politically led by the nose or led by the politics or whatever, right? So that was also failure. And this damages other perhaps legitimate articles in that journal. So the journal has failed all the other people whom are perhaps, all the would-be legitimate scholars in the field of, shall we say, grievance studies. Because I don't care. Something like grievance studies, for example, you may say, grievance studies are intersectionally, the intersectional Olympics, the oppression Olympics. Trust me, there is always good information or something good to be said about any of these particular areas, because there's always something interesting to be noted about inequality, okay, where it stems from, what can be done about it, the different factors that affect it, for example, and so on. Legitimate research, right, about any kind of difference. It may be differences between men and women in terms of interest, and then how that particular set of that the difference then replicates itself, or shall we say displays itself in the broader economy, for example. Or difference, you could bring all this identity and personality and all these weird things even into study, and there will be a good way to study them. So falling for this BS actually then undermines any good information that could have been gotten from this, that could have been gleaned from this, right? because this kind of crap happens all the time. It's either, you're kicking out Charles Murray, calling him a racist because he's asking about IQ and how that leads to class difference. Oh, there's a correlation between IQ and classes. Okay, you're a racist, right? And then on the other end, you have people drinking the Kool-Aid and producing BS results in areas that perhaps we could have found something legitimate in these weird fringe postmodernist corners. But anyways, let's continue. Click the like button. Super chat.
Line in that paper was a fat body is a built body. And one of the reviewers was like,
I wholeheartedly agree, or something like that.
Oh, Jesus
so we want
Christ.
to,
It is
and
a
then
built
we wrote
body.
other papers like to Hypatia. We published a paper
Built by
accepted,
God
not
Almighty.
published, but that one we claim that it's
And Krispy Kreme.
unacceptable.
It's unethical to make fun of anything to do with social justice.
Right.
And so if you want to make fun of things that don't have anything to do with social justice, that's good. So if we wanted to make fun of men, that's great. If you want to make fun of white people, that's great. If you want to make fun of anything to do with social justice, that's a problem. So we said that, South Park's a huge problem. The Simpsons is a huge problem. We went into talking about how Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart have the right idea, but then the journal was like, but they're straight white males. So you have to, nuance around that to make it clear that their position is white men, even though they're on the side of social justice. It's not quite good enough,
So they published that.
They published that.
They published that.
What was that? What was that one called?
That one was called When the Joke's on You.
Yeah. And we wrote it so that they would think the joke is on us because we cited our own work in there.
Right.
But the joke was actually on them for publishing it.
Yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
It's so funny how racist you can be as long as you're racist against white people.
That's what we saw, is that as long as you are going up the river against privilege, then you can really just get away with some nasty stuff.
Yeah, and you can generalize.
Totally.
Gross generalizations.
Absolutely.
Do not treat people as individuals.
Absolutely.
It's very strange. It's very strange that this is the left. I was a kid in San Francisco in the 1970s.
Okay, let me ask you now, Dr. Thunder, what about those politically dangerous ideas? Are there any reasons why, we should worry about what people like Charles Murray are studying? Again, Charles Murray wrote, I'm just using him now as a caricature, but wrote The Bell Curve, a book that's looking at IQ and then class distributions. And then obviously there's going to be a racial component to this. And one may ask, well, this is dangerous information. Why are you keeping data about, about how blacks are doing or how different classes are doing with IQ? Why would you possibly want to know this? Is there anything in your view, do you have any sentiment at all as to what needs to be protected in the realm of free inquiry? Or are you complete laissez-faire, complete free inquiry? Any question should be asked, especially here in the university. We should not be bringing in political concerns. That is for the political arena. We're not here to play politics. Maybe I'm influencing the conversation, but it's a question to you.
Yeah. Well, I actually don't have an issue with people bringing politics into, political science, right? And just flat out people that want to say whatever they want to say. Part of the whole tenure thing was to create, a safe space, as it were, for people that wanted to say inconvenient things. And politics is one of the most, politics and religion, those are the two things you're not supposed to talk about, right? But those are the most controversial, and they're the most interesting things too, by the way. So yeah, I mean, I think that, you should be able to talk about anything you want to talk about. I think
you do like people to have their biases up front. You do have that rule though, right? That, we're going to state up front what your axioms are, what your biases are. You're going to need to sketch out the location of your cave. Can't have this ephemeral cave.
That is my
exist.
preference, because the thing is that just makes it easier for people to get some sort of idea about you.
You see, if I'm a postmodernist jouster, which they are, because they're political kind of fighters more than idea people, they're kind of the new sophist, if you will. I would say, look, the only reason you're trying to locate my cave is so you can throw nuclear weapons at it, right? Therefore, and since I believe this is all a power game anyways, why should I tell you what my cave is? Why should I give you some kinds of axioms? Or why should I hold through to any of your white man logic, sir? But, and then this gets actually taken as serious, even though they don't say it in so many words. But that's what they're mainly saying, right?
Yeah. But I think that we should be able to discuss whatever we want to. Um, as far as my ability to get stuff from people, I prefer to have an idea about what their biases are. And it's not just about, honestly, I'm going to tell you, understanding what a person's bias is, uh, someone knowing what their bias is and being willing to share it with me, that's actually more important than what the bias is, right? Because it shows like a level of
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and then it makes it more likely that the person, uh, because they know what their bias is, are going to be aware that they're going to have certain blind spots associated with what those biases are, right?
Okay, so they're aware of their
Uh,
blind spots. This person is self-aware. Also, you can recognize them as a fellow traveler on the path to truth, insofar as they're honest enough to be like, "Hey,
right.
here's my toolkit for the truth dig that we're doing," as opposed to people who don't even. Right. Okay.
And I happen to believe that the pursuit of truth is prerequisite for anything, any meaningful enterprise.
Hmm.
It's the pursuit
Yeah,
of
and
truth.
and
That's the
people
first thing that
it
leads people to anything that matters.
it often sounds quaint now when you talk about it in certain kinds of academic circles. Oh, truth, right? The pursuit of truth. What do you mean? Blah blah blah. You kind of get laughed at. In again, especially let's say adjacent to the grievance studies people, not necessarily even the grievance studies people. Maybe some psychologists or even some econ professors are like, oh, pursuit of truth. That kind of a thing. Yeah, in other words, postmodernism kind of eating more and more into the, and again, postmodernism generally being the idea of, all caves are BS and I'm not going to have a cave and I can actually exist without a cave, exist without a grand narrative of any sort, either because I am just, I was born outside the cave and I'm this kind of miraculous being which doesn't exist, or because I'm actually just playing a shady power game, right? Which is honest too, because if somebody came to you, Dr. Thunder, and be like, you know what? No, I'm just actually a sophist here, and I actually don't believe in logic and blah blah blah. But I'm here to do sophistry because I think that all this stuff is about power, and I would like my people to take over the power mechanisms, right? At least the person will be honest with you, right? Like say, hey, I'm straight up postmodern mercenary. Anyways, let's see here. Joe Rogan kind of lament his whole kind of liberal growing up story.
We lived in, like there was the hippie times, and I lived there from age 7 to 11, and it kind of formed a lot of my opinions about people, like the who gives a shit part of my appreciation for any group, whatever it is, whether it's race or gender or sexual orientation. And I don't understand it from either way. I certainly don't understand it from a racist perspective, but I really don't understand it from racism that's condoned because it's racism against white people.
Oh, yeah.
That this is the left. This is these are the people that are preaching against hate.
Mhm.
And these are the people that used to be the people that were supposedly so open-minded and so open to ideas, and now they're trying to stifle creativity and stifle dissent and stifle anything that doesn't fit inside that very narrow paradigm that they're trying to push. It's very strange.
Yeah, they co-opted the civil rights movement, the good name of the civil rights movement.
Okay, Dr. Thunder, we know what they're saying here, but something is interesting that they just said that struck me, and I wanted to kind of see your take on it. And that is this mistake that people make when they go about forming political teams. Maybe they belong to the team, or maybe they claim they don't belong to political teams, but they're just defining political teams. And this mistake they make is they assign certain character attributes to certain teams. Let's say the attribute of what is they want to help, the left wants to help, or the left wants to help the downtrodden, that kind of, like they're people of a good heart. That's what Joe Rogan is doing right here now. He's saying, oh, but this is the
Right.
left, this is people with a good heart, they're supposed to, and then you have some other kind of a caricature of, let's say, the right. Okay, now that happens a great deal, at least it happens with everybody. Okay, and sometimes we grow and then we see certain things, and I just want to share something, and maybe you have a reaction to it. In this particular regard, as they mentioned it, this came to mind. Thinking that one side of the aisle was more individualistic, and the other side of the aisle was more groupish, was one of my fallacies. I used to think, okay, well, the conservatives, you have at least you have the libertarians there. They have that individual ethos and this kinds of stuff, blah 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 blah. And then over there on the left, they're more. And well, no, no, that's not what's going on. Because generally, here's how I used to then kind of be confused, because I would see then, let's say, Republicans doing all kinds of silly groupish stuff, like just banding up and saying, I don't like this guy because he's a Democrat, right? Like you would see them, what you would think, oh, okay, the Republicans, these are the kind of individualistic, more or less, philosophically libertarian, blah, blah, blah. But then you see them do this groupish stuff. And then you realize that that's not really what's going on, because those kinds of tendencies to be groupish or to be less individual, these are equally spread amongst both parties. And that's not actually what's going on. So it's just something that I noticed, that when we look at political aisles, we tend to think, oh, that's just that it actually means, okay, if you're a Democrat, that means you're supposed to be a caring person, that you care about something. And how could you be racist against white people? Aren't you supposed to be caring? It's like, no, it's just the flag that they're waving. It doesn't, anyways. But
Yep.
I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think it's just about what the agenda is, So you may be more of an individual if that's what it calls for, that your team is, that your team is supporting or whatever, and more like in orient more like a team, when that suits whatever your political agenda is. Yeah, I mean, I don't see significant difference between Democrats and Republicans. I mean, there are certain agenda items that each one really, okay, this is the stuff that we do. This is the stuff that we're for, and we're opposed to those other guys. There's that component of it, and some of those things there's some substantive difference there. But with respect to the way that they behave, it's all a power grab. It's all about, they ultimately they still have the same, the same motivation. It's not like there are less Republican narcissists than there are Democrat narcissists. I mean, they're all love to be seen, and they all want power. They're all thirsty, hungry for power. They're all so hungry for power that they are willing to give up a great deal of privacy that most people are not willing to do. So, I mean, they're all kind of the same kind of folks in my mind. And then if I go down a little, closer to the ground, then I'll also say that neither party has been particularly good for Black people. And so this talking point that Democrats use, that they're the party for the Black people, they love the Black people, this goofy stuff. No, I don't see any more evidence that they love the Black people than the Republicans love the Black people. They living in their gated communities and totally separated from any of the kinds of real issues that Black people actually face. So,
Speaking of gated communities, okay, basically we have A Hill here commenting on certain things, such as, they're for a particular type of, shall we say, they're for the free and the radical and the downtrodden and the artists or whatever. But then when their property, when you get coming into their gated neighborhoods, right, they're like, whoa, what's this? And when you're messing up their money, they go a certain way. Now, this is just to say a certain thing here, because you mentioned it. A Hill is saying that there is a certain political strata that some theorists call the bourgeoisie, and when that term is used in a derogatory way, okay, when it is used in a derogatory way, it means the people in the middle that are social climbers, okay, that are not exceptional because they're not artists or philosophers or whatever. That's a different class of people, okay? The bourgeoisie is not that, okay? The bourgeoisie is just, your middle class, okay, trying to climb. They're not exceptional people. They're not the aristocracy. They're not they're not the gods and generals, if you will. Okay, so they're not the warrior princes. They're not out there, conquering people. Neither are they being new creative thinkers, such as they say the artists, the philosophers, the priests, whatever, right? They're the bourgeoisie. There's this blob of people whom they would glob on, do anything to climb up or to be seen as good, as clean, as better, as more righteous, right? Meanwhile, standing on the poor that they claim to represent. So that whole idea of you are the product, whenever you don't know what quite the product is, you are the product. Basically, the idea is, the product is the poor that these bourgeoisie or whatever is standing on in this particular case, in which, this description here, and using them. And that's why the bourgeoisie is particularly disgusting in this particular kind of representation of things. Okay, not that it's perfect. Obviously, it's a silly little, it's a model, but there's something about that middle class. Let me climb up. Okay, shout out to the printing press, but when it gave people education, get people stuff to read, what you said earlier comes into play. People can now read and repeat. Okay, the bourgeoisie is the class that says, "Give me something to read so I can repeat, so you can give me a pat on the head, master." Right, and that is it becomes. Now this is here's what I'm doing. I'm giving a aristocratic argument. And by the way, I like to give these kinds of arguments because it's not the kinds of things you hear in modern times, right? So an aristocrat is the one making this critique, saying, "Look, your society of democratic society is a bourgeois society. It's a society of climbers. It's a society of non-exceptional people being given leaflets to read and repeat. My society is one where, the truth, the good, and the honor, and the best rise to the top, and the warrior princes, blah, blah, blah." So would go this particular kind of argument. But anyways, let's play a little bit more of this before we somehow we went back to Middle Earth and all kinds of things.
Movement is kind of the brand that they ride on. They're fighting against racism, they're fighting against sexism, misogyny, etc. And the thing is that's not really what's going on here. They've actually tapped into this, to throw around the term, this postmodern notion that everything in society has to do with power dynamics, and the power dynamics have to be understood in terms of groups and how those groups have traditionally held power and exercised power. And so immediately it becomes stuck in this idea that it's all about this group or that group and how they relate to one another. And I don't mean like, hey, let's get along, relate. I mean like white people are imagined to always be over black people, and therefore, there's always this natural power dynamic of oppressor versus oppressed. And this is stuff that came straight out of this weird postmodern philosophy where you saw these dissatisfied French philosophers in the 60s, all this stuff you were talking about was going down. They saw all this stuff and they said, wow, okay, power dynamics are the thing. Because I should go back a step. The postmodern philosophers like Foucault and all of this got all hooked up on power because they were dissatisfied with seeing what they called grand narratives, Christianity, capitalism, Marxism. They saw all these huge, explanations for how the world works and said, they're not working. Look how bad communism failed. Look how there's so much, bullshit coming out of this or that from religion. It's not working. We need to just get rid of all of it. We're going to deconstruct this. We're going to break it down to its power dynamics. And then we're going to look at it in terms of who has masterhood over who's oppressing what, where's dominance. And it's just kind of grown. It got picked up in the academic culture in the 1960s. That's how old this stuff is. And then it took this huge turn in the 1990s and got really vicious, and that's where it really got, that's when it turned intersectional. Actually,
that was during the politically correct days.
That's when the political correct thing kind of blew up. Yeah, that's when all
this
this stuff was coming out. So that would have been, late 1980s is really when all of this political correctness stuff started coming out of the academy, and then a few years later you see it coming all over politics, which is typically what happens. It starts in the academy a few years.
Gotta start landing the plane, Dr. Thunder. It seems like it's about that time, and we might depend on what other actual info they have in here with regards to the other studies and certain other things. We might do one more week on this idea, progressivism, again in academia. Okay,
sure.
It's interesting, this thing that they say about the whole kind of power thing, because a lot of, would you buy the postmodernist argument as a strategy, as a political strategy, basically saying, look, you have to look for the ways in which your oppressor is oppressing you in everything. like even in their language, in their ideas of what is normal, the ideas of values, everything. You got to be looking out, right? Because you could see the same sentiment in many other kinds of, shall we say, radical views of society, or views of the man, right, and the Matrix, and watch out. Okay, do you share that kind of a view, or do you think it's valid, or you're like, nah?
So part of the reason why I want people to tell me what their bias is um, I, like I said, I want to get the sense that they have a certain sense of self-awareness. See, this whole power dynamic thing, that's like tenets of a religion, what it is that they've constructed. And it overrides everything else that's in observable reality, right? It overrides everything else. It's like, no, it is this power dynamic. Even if there isn't a power dynamic, they're going to see a power dynamic, right? And the danger with that is that they don't see it as being a religion. They don't see it as being biased. They just think that this is just how things are. Okay? And so I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem with that. Do I think that there is some truth to it? I think there is some truth to it. I think there are some interesting points that can be made. However, the fact that they don't see it as being just as religious as, somebody that, obeys all the fasting regulations on the Orthodox calendar.
Okay, so let's find out, Dr. Thunder, what you got this Thursday on Thunder's Thoughts. Okay.
Yeah, I've got
you and Dr. Doug holding fort again.
Yeah, I got something really spicy. Check this out.
Okay, what is it? It's
yeah, so that's my show this Thursday.
about divestments. Okay.
Yeah,
Divestments.
Multiculturalism plus deregulated dating market equals divestment. And I'm going to be reviewing an interview that Dennis Sperling did with a divestor. And then also there's some other I've got some other things going to focus on. I have a great pre-show. Thunder's Thoughts always has a pre-show with music. So it's me performing in various situations. So that'll be part of the show, the pre-show. I've got a really nice, a really worked out monologue, sort of tying a lot of the issues together. The problem with the multiculturalism thing, which leads into this eventual divestment, is that if you have a dominant society, so in America there's a dominant society, that's white folks, and so if white folks are like, hey, we want multiculturalism, we like the idea of having a lot of different ideas, a lot of different kind of people. We like the idea of people looking different and bringing everybody together under the same sort of umbrella. We like this kind of idea. So that's cool, but you need to understand that the version of the cultures brought together that will be promoted and accepted, the aspects of those cultures will be the ones that the dominant society is comfortable with. Okay, so it's not so you're not really getting the full thing. You're getting what the dominant society is comfortable with. So what ends up happening is, as people climb the ladder, they get better jobs, Maybe their family made some good decisions financially. Their kids are able to go to some private schools and associate with more folks from the dominant society. Invariably, what happens is a percentage of those minority populations are going to marry folks from the dominant society, because the members from the folks from the dominant society will have more status. And we know that women in particular are particularly attracted to people that have status, that have financial capital, that have so you're gonna end up with a disproportionate number of the women from minority groups partnering off with folks from the dominant society. That's
As it
going
should
to
be.
be what happens, because that's just how it works. And I think right now we're having a lot of these conversations about divestment and interracial, marriage and dating and X, Y, and Z and Ketanji Brown Jackson and all of this. There's a lot of discussion right now on these topics. And so I just wanted to do a show that kind of really brought a lot of that stuff together.
Yeah, that'd be
So
pretty
that's-
nice. And case closed on your channel this Sunday, again, 4 p.m. Eastern, every week, 4 p.m. Eastern, either my channel, your channel, or someone else's channel, but case closed. Okay. And we'll be back next Tuesday. Okay. We might continue with
That's
this
correct.
topic. And this was a good one. Okay. Getting ish done with Dr. Thunder. Ike and Dr. Thunder next Tuesday. It is 9:30 Eastern time, right? Now, I think that we were able to kind of tackle and unravel this thing a little bit. And basically, it comes down to what we mentioned several times, which is you bring in political concerns, either through just simple leanings. I have a particular political leaning, I have a particular idea, and then I make my students that way. I create little clones. I want to rise up. This other person I wants to rise up. So I'm going to toe the line, the company line, right? So political influence, as you would expect, starts coming in and playing a big role. We did not even mention, and perhaps we'll bring in the money factor, okay? The fact that there is a pool of money, you mentioned it once or twice, that people may be fighting for example, which is another huge, massive incentive, okay? Because we've been talking about the political aspects of things. We didn't talk about the political economy and the money aspect of things, okay? Which will lead people to then go a particular way. So again, social sciences being damaged by raising political concerns, such as, let's say, diversity and inclusion, above and beyond, or over, I should say, academic rigor and truth seeking, okay, is the issue. And the hoax papers, where we got a little bit of fun looking at the dogs at the park and their humping behavior, and which kind of humping was encouraged, and which kind of humping, and how that promotes grape culture, right? Queer performativity, I believe, was part of the title. Queer performativity, yeah, and humping in the parks.
Oh my goodness. There's something towards the end of the video. I think I told you I watched this. It was about this is pretty crude what it was about.
Oh, okay. Really? All right. Let's
see. South Park came out, it started doing these themes. How does it track? Statisticians can do kind of amazing things with that stuff, but they're not doing that. They're not testing it. Instead of testing it, they're concluding it, and they're using theory to do so.
And they're
no, it's even bigger than that, because why don't they test it? Well, if they tested it, and I'm not making this shit up, you won't believe me, but this is true. If they tested it and the test showed that their hypothesis was wrong, they would say that the test was racist,
right?
That the test is condoning racism, and that's why it didn't give them the deserved result.
How would you test something like this?
I'm not a statistician. I'm actually a mathematician, but I'm not a statistician. They're two different things. And so we said that, well, that's a kind of transphobia. And clearly the reason that they might be transphobic is because they don't practice putting things in their butts. So if they start putting stuff up
yeah. This is the thing. Rewind a little bit.
Yeah. So
that's the joy. This is ridiculous, man.
Yeah. No. Look, these guys are quite clever. Okay. I mean, these are nice little things they threw at them. They were like, hey, look, people are transphobic. Do you agree? And everyone who has signed up and agreed said, yes, this is the orthodoxy of our time. Okay, cool. Part of what's making them transphobic is because they haven't had stuff up their butt. And everyone's like,
Yeah.
And then, but it's like, hey, plausible. Okay. Got to expose them to the kinds of things that the different communities are exposed to. If there's a community that is exposed to things being up their butt, then you should, it follows. So anyways, let's see if I can.
That's everything. The whole world's a
That's
fucking
their
problem.
tool. That's why we call it grievance studies. The whole world's a
It's a
problem.
grievance. They're massively okay. So then, but the transphobia.
Yeah,
thing.
the trans paper. So we wrote this paper saying that straight men are generally transphobic, meaning in particular the kind of niche weird definition that you see on the internet and activists sometimes, that they aren't interested in having sex with trans people who have penises, trans women who have a penis in particular. And so we said that, well, that's a kind of transphobia, and clearly the reason that they might be transphobic is because they don't practice putting things in their butts. So if they start putting stuff up their butts, in particular, we call the paper dildos. So you can imagine what we were saying, they should put up
The
their
whole
butts.
paper was called dildos?
No, that was a nickname we gave it. The paper was
Oh.
called Going In Through the Back Door.
Really?
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Going in through the back door.
And
And,
we
then there's a
argued
lot
that
of
you can-
technical
Did
words.
that one get published?
Yeah, that's what you can
published.
see online. You can see online. So we argued that if straight men just penetrated themselves and had their girlfriends peg them through exposure therapy, you start small and then work your way up, you can remediate transphobia.
Yeah, we'll make them less transphobic.
So
I mean, some of the manosphere conspiracy theorists are could have a field day with this. See, I told you. That's why they're bringing these weirdos up in here talking about pegging, and that's why that guy with the man purses. Okay, I'm telling you.
As a
by
result.
self-penetrating or having your girlfriend peg you can be less transphobic. And they thought this is a great
And
idea.
so we based this off of 8 interviews, really 13 interviews, but with men. And I say really 8, 13. There were 13 interviews documented, but 5 of them were with gay people, not even straight people. So they don't really apply. So then we have these 8 interviews with straight men. We made one of them a conservative. And he's just, so we could just put in like, crazy things that a conservative might say about this. And they were like, why weren't there more conservatives participating? So I was like, well, I'm going to run with this. And I wrote this whole thing. We invited 6 conservatives to participate and only 1 accepted. And to kind of
6 conservatives to participate in putting stuff up their butt.
summarize why, in the words, and this is in the paper, in the words of one, I don't want to be a part of some stupid liberal study about shoving things up your butt.
and they published,
that.
Boom, right in.
Right in.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
So we
here
wrote
it is.
All right.
Oh
so
my
Dr. Thunder,
goodness.
you got your laughs in. Okay.
Man, when I watched that, I haven't laughed. I haven't laughed this hard for a long time. Watching this video, man, it's freaking hilarious. These dudes.
James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, ladies and gentlemen, that's their name. Okay, now you can go check them out. They got YouTube. They got a lot of content, so you can look into these set of papers that they wrote on the Grievance Studies. And again, one of them is a professor at Portland University, and then James Lindsay, who's the one on the screen right now, was a former mathematician, left academia, and is doing this stuff. So if you want to look into this stuff further, you can go check them out and see what they did. And it'll take you down the whole rabbit hole there on the whole grievance studies arena. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Until next time.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity nupty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the Trouble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised. The battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.